A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
Herman, have you noticed how the loudest voices in the artificial intelligence space are usually the ones trying to sell us a chatbot that can write a sonnet about a grilled cheese sandwich? It is like there is a massive party happening in the front yard with all the flashing lights and viral memes, while in the back office, the actual work of running the global economy is being handled by people who do not care about poetry at all. They care about uptime, security, and whether or not the model can actually read a messy invoice from 1994.
It is a fascinating divide, corn. My name is Herman Poppleberry, and you are spot on about that contrast. While the general public is obsessed with the latest consumer-facing hype and whether an AI can pass the bar exam, there is this quiet giant in the room that has been methodically building the plumbing for the modern enterprise. Today's prompt from Daniel is about Cohere, and it is a perfect entry point into why the cool kids of AA might not be the ones winning the long game in the corporate world. We are talking about a company that has largely ignored the chatbot arms race to focus on the unglamorous, high-stakes world of B2B infrastructure.
Daniel is really leaning into the infrastructure side of things this time. It is funny because most people have never heard of Cohere, yet they are sitting on a valuation of nearly $7 billion and just hit $240 million in annual recurring revenue for 2025. They are growing 50% quarter over quarter. That is not quiet money. That is, we are taking over the building money. And they just made a massive splash in the defense sector this week that we have to talk about.
And they are doing it with a very specific identity. They call themselves the Switzerland of AI. If you look at the landscape, OpenAI is essentially the research arm of Microsoft at this point. Anthropic is deeply intertwined with Amazon and Google. If you are a massive bank or a defense contractor, that kind of vendor lock-in is terrifying. You do not want your entire intelligence layer tied to a single cloud provider's whims. Cohere's whole pitch is, we do not care where you run your data, as long as you use our brains to process it.
That Switzerland framing is brilliant because it addresses the number one fear for a CTO right now, being held hostage by a cloud provider. If you are JP Morgan Chase or a major hospital system, you cannot just move your entire data stack because a cloud provider decides to change their pricing or their terms of service. You need to be able to run your models wherever your data lives.
That is exactly the point. Well, that is the core of their strategy. They are cloud-agnostic. You can run Cohere on Oracle, on Amazon Web Services, on Google Cloud, or, most importantly for the big players, inside your own private virtual cloud or even on-premise. Just this week, on March 23, 2026, the Swedish defense contractor Saab signed a deal to put Cohere models into their GlobalEye surveillance aircraft and their next-generation submarines. You are not going to send top-secret submarine sensor data to a public API endpoint in San Francisco. You need that model running locally, behind your own firewall, with zero data leakage.
Submarines? That is a high-stakes environment for a large language model. I can just imagine the AI hallucinating a non-existent torpedo because it got a bit too creative with the sonar data. But that brings up a good point about their actual technology. If you are going to put AI in a submarine or a high-frequency trading desk, pretty good is not good enough. You need precision. What is Cohere doing differently with their models like Command-R Plus that makes them the choice for these regulated industries?
It comes down to a philosophy of grounded generation. Most models are trained to be helpful and conversational, which often leads them to fill in the gaps with plausible-sounding nonsense when they do not know the answer. Cohere built Command-R Plus specifically for retrieval, augmented generation, or RAG. It was the first major model to prioritize inline citations. When it gives you an answer, it points directly to the specific sentence in your internal documents where it found that information. It turns the model from a creative writer into a very sophisticated research librarian. It does not just tell you the answer, it shows you the receipt.
It is funny you call it a librarian. I always think of the big consumer models as that one friend who is incredibly confident even when they are totally wrong, whereas Cohere feels like the person in the meeting who refuses to speak unless they have the spreadsheet open in front of them. But I want to dig into the resourceful aspect you mentioned. I was reading that they focus on models that can run on just 1 or 2 graphics processing units. In a world where everyone else is building these massive 100,000 chip clusters, why is being small an advantage?
Because for an enterprise, the cost of inference is the silent killer of AI projects. If you have to spin up a massive cluster of H100s just to summarize your internal emails, the return on investment disappears instantly. Co-founder Ivan Zhang has been very vocal about this. By optimizing their models to be highly efficient, they allow companies to deploy them on consumer-grade hardware or smaller enterprise setups. It makes private deployment actually affordable. They are not chasing the highest parameter count, they are chasing the highest utility per watt ratio. If you can get 95% of the performance of a massive model using 5% of the hardware, the CFO is going to pick the efficient model every single time.
That makes sense. It is the difference between buying a Formula One car to go to the grocery store and buying a very efficient, very reliable delivery van. You want the van. But let us talk about the embed and re-rank models, because that is where I think the real secret sauce is. Most people focus on the large language model, the part that talks back to you. But Cohere seems to be winning because of the parts you do not see.
You hit on the most important technical differentiator. Most companies realize that the model is only as good as the data you feed it. If your search system pulls the wrong documents, the model will give you a wrong, albeit well-cited, answer. Cohere's Embed version 4, which came out late last year, is widely considered the gold standard for handling noisy enterprise data. Think about what a company's internal data actually looks like. It is not clean Wikipedia articles. It is messy PDFs with weird formatting, Slack logs full of typos and inside jokes, and legacy database entries that haven't been touched since 2008. Embed version 4 is specifically trained to navigate that mess better than the general-purpose embedding models from OpenAI.
And then there is Rerank. I love the concept of Rerank because it feels so practical. It is basically a second pass for your search, right? Explain how that actually works for someone who isn't a data scientist.
It is a two-step process that solves the accuracy versus speed trade-off. In a typical vector search, you are looking for things that are mathematically close to your query. That is fast, but it is a bit blunt. It might miss the nuance. Rerank takes the top 50 or 100 results from that fast search and does a much deeper, more computationally expensive analysis to reorder them so the absolute best context is at the very top. It is the difference between a quick keyword search and having an expert read the top 10 hits to tell you which one actually answers your question. For high accuracy RAG, it is almost mandatory. Without Rerank, you are basically just guessing that your search engine is perfect, and in the enterprise world, it never is.
It sounds like they are building a stack that assumes the world is a messy, disorganized place, rather than assuming everything is perfectly indexed. I want to pivot to the people behind this, because the origin story here is actually wild. Aidan Gomez is the name everyone mentions. He was an intern at Google Brain when he co-authored Attention is All You Need. That is the paper that literally invented the transformer architecture that powers every single model we talk about today. He was the youngest author on that paper.
It is incredible to think about. He was essentially a kid when he helped lay the foundation for the entire industry. And what is interesting is that he did not stay at Google to ride the wave of internal promotions. He saw very early on that the real challenge was not going to be just making the models bigger, but making them useful for the world outside of research labs. He teamed up with Nick Frost, who was a protege of Geoffrey Hinton, often called the godfather of AI. Frost brings that deep academic rigor but combines it with a very pragmatic edge.
Nick Frost has that classic researcher pedigree, but I have heard him talk about how they intentionally ignored the consumer chatbot race. They could have built a Cohere GPT and tried to go viral on social media. But they realized that AI fatigue was going to set in for consumers while businesses were just starting to get serious. It was a massive strategic gamble to stay quiet while everyone else was screaming for attention. They were basically betting that the cool factor would fade and the reliability factor would become the only thing that mattered.
It was a masterclass in focus. While everyone else was arguing about whether an AI is sentient or trying to get it to write funny tweets, Cohere was in the trenches with companies like JP Morgan Chase, figuring out how to make a model stay within a bank's private infrastructure. That is why Gartner recently called them the IBM of AI. They are not here to be your friend, they are here to be your infrastructure. They are building the boring, essential stuff that makes the modern world run.
Though I have to say, they did break their quiet streak today. On this very day, March 27, 2026, they released Transcribe. This is a big deal because it is an open source model, a 2 billion parameter speech recognition model that is currently sitting at the top of the Hugging Face leaderboard. It has a word error rate of 5.42%. To put that in perspective, that beats Whisper, Large version 3, which was the previous heavyweight champion.
The technical architecture of Transcribe is worth a deep dive. They are using a hybrid conformer architecture. It combines convolutional neural networks, or CNNs, which are great at capturing local audio patterns like specific phonemes, with transformers, which are great at capturing the long-range context of a sentence. It is a best of both worlds approach, and again, it is optimized to run on consumer-grade GPUs. They are basically giving away a world-class transcription tool for free to the developer community under an Apache 2.0 license.
Which is a bit of a pivot, right? They caught some heat on Reddit and in developer forums earlier this year for moving away from open weights for their largest models. People were worried they were closing the gates and becoming just another proprietary black box. Releasing Transcribe as a fully open model feels like a strategic olive branch to the open source community.
It is a smart move. It reminds me of what we discussed back in episode 1564 about the omnimodal shift. We are moving away from these cascaded pipelines where you convert speech to text, then process it, then convert it back. Models like Transcribe are the first step toward a more integrated, fluid way of handling audio. If you can run a world-class transcription model locally, for free, you have just removed a massive barrier for any developer building voice-first applications. It signals that Cohere still values the developer ecosystem, even as they chase these massive defense and finance contracts.
It also fits their Switzerland theme. If you're a developer, you do not want to be reliant on a proprietary API for your speech to text if you can run something better on your own hardware. But let us look at the bigger picture. We've got these rumors of a 2026 initial public offering. If Cohere goes public, it will be a massive barometer for the health of the enterprise AI market. Do you think they can maintain this quiet giant status as a public company?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. Being the plumbing of the industry is incredibly lucrative, but it is not always sexy for Wall Street. Investors love consumer growth stories and viral numbers. But if they can show that they are the essential layer for defense, finance, and healthcare industries that will never go away and have massive budgets, the IPO could be historic. They are positioning themselves as the safe, reliable choice. In a gold rush, everyone wants to be the one selling the most famous shovel, but Cohere is the one selling the insurance, the land rights, and the heavy machinery to dig the mine.
I love that. They are the ones making sure the shovel actually works when it hits a rock. So, if you are a developer or a systems architect listening to this, what is the actual takeaway? Because it is easy to just get caught up in the model names and the valuation numbers.
The takeaway is to stop thinking about the large language model as a standalone solution. If you are building for an enterprise, your priority should be your retrieval stack. Look at the Rerank and Embed models first. You might find that a smaller, more efficient model like Command-R+, when paired with a high-quality rank pass, outperforms a much larger, more expensive model that is just guessing based on a messy vector search. Accuracy in the enterprise is about the context you provide, not just the size of the brain processing it.
And for the architects out there, the resourceful model approach is a game changer for cost control. If you can deploy within your own virtual private cloud and not pay per token fees to a third party, your long-term scaling costs become predictable. That is a huge selling point when you are trying to get a budget approved by a CFO who is skeptical of AI magic and wants to see a clear path to profitability.
We should also keep an eye on their North Agent Orchestration platform. That is where they are trying to tie all these pieces together. The embeddings, the re-ranking, the grounded generation into a single layer that can actually do things across an organization. It is a direct evolution of what we talked about in episode 1500 regarding the move toward agentic AAI. They want to move from a model that answers questions to a system that executes workflows.
It is funny, we started this talking about sonnets and grilled cheese, but we ended up at submarine surveillance and agentic orchestration. It just goes to show that the weird prompts always lead to the most substantial places. Cohere might not be the name your grandmother knows, but it might be the reason her bank's customer service actually works, or her hospital's data stays private. They are winning by being the most useful person in the room, not the loudest.
It is a fascinating study in corporate discipline. Aidan Gomez, Nick Frost, Ivan Zhang, and their team have resisted the urge to be famous in favor of being essential. In the long run, essential usually wins, especially when the hype cycles start to cool down and people start asking, okay, but what does this actually do for my bottom line?
Well, I, for one, am glad someone is focusing on the plumbing. I like my grilled cheese sonnets as much as the next sloth, but I prefer my bank data to stay in the bank. Herman, this has been a great deep dive. I feel like I finally understand why the Switzerland strategy is more than just a marketing slogan. It is a survival strategy for the next decade of computing.
It is a fundamental shift in how we think about the operating system of the intelligence age. It is about sovereignty, efficiency, and truth.
Before we wrap up, I want to make sure we give a big thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes. And a huge thank you to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this very show. If you are looking for high-performance serverless infrastructure, they are the ones doing it right.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the architecture of enterprise AI, you should definitely check out our website at myweirdprompts.com. You can search our entire archive of over 1,500 episodes to find more technical breakdowns like this one. We have covered everything from the early days of Transformers to the latest in omnimodal audio.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much everywhere you find your audio fix. If you are finding these episodes helpful, leave us a review. It actually makes a huge difference in helping other curious nerds find the show, and keeps us motivated to keep digging into these technical rabbit holes.
We will be back soon with another prompt. Thanks for listening.
Stay curious. Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the close from sloth.